Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be talking about the Nikon ZR, and I kind of want to do a series with this because I have not been this excited about a camera since I got my hands on the Leica Q3. And for a lot of different reasons. So I'm going to try and be concise, but I've been using it since it came out essentially, and I also had the opportunity to get some hands-on with it pre-release. Nikon came over to Utah and we were able to film some really cool stuff with it. If you haven't seen my initial thoughts video, I'll have that link down below. But this is more of kind of not a definitive review because it's still, within the first month of me owning this camera. But even within that short period of time, I have fallen in love with it. And it's just, I don't know, we're very spoiled as filmmakers these days with our options. And I feel that Nikon and Red have done something really well with the ZR. So I just want to talk about some things that I have been drawn to because of this camera. Okay, so I'm going to do more of an in-depth video at a later date going over dynamic range and low light performance of the ZR, but I just wanted to show how impressed I am with its low light performance and just quickly touch upon ISO and dynamic range. So this is a chart right here that Nikon have provided us to understand how the dynamic range works in R3D. Now, CineD put out something that a lot of people got upset about, saying that we were missing a lot of stops of dynamic range, and they were very disappointed. Now, I like to rely on real world situations rather than controlled environments. So this scene right here, it's very dark. I'm filming at the second base ISO of 6400. And as it's red footage, I have full control of my ISO. So in post, I bring it up to 12,800. Then I add a Rec 709 conversion, and I add my own LUT and color grading. And then I add some noise reduction, as red footage has no noise reduction baked in camera, unlike Sony's where there's no control to turn some of that noise reduction off. I'm at 12,800 ISO, it cleans up better than I've seen any Sony footage clean up with noise reduction, and it just handles it really well. And overall, I'm incredibly impressed with the dynamic range and the low light performance of the ZR. So I might be repeating myself a little bit from that initial video a couple of months ago when it was announced, but I just want to go over just kind of an updated thought process on why I love the ZR. Now, first things first, it's been talked about a lot by myself and by other people. I'm just going to clean it real quick. It's got some fingerprints on it. But the first thing is this absolutely stunning screen. It is a 4-inch, 1000 nit peak brightness screen with DCI-P3 color rating. So if you're someone like myself that doesn't like to rig up a camera, this is incredible. When I go back to my Sonys, I absolutely hate it. It just feels like I've gone back like 2 decades in terms of technology and innovation with that tiny monitor. And it's really hard to explain without you seeing it for yourself. But whenever I'm using this monitor, I don't feel the need whatsoever to have an additional monitoring screen. We've gotten to a point, I feel, where cameras are just so good these days. So it's minor increments that make the experience better that I value. And having a larger monitor without the need to rig up my camera makes a world of difference. Whatever lens I'm using, whether I'm using manual focus, anamorphic lenses, autofocus lenses, I have zero need or desire to rig up a monitor to this camera. And I think that's partially why Nikon had maybe opted for a micro HDMI port, which I know a lot of people have got upset about. But even still, if you put a cage on this, you can get a clamp, and you should be using a clamp anyway, in my opinion, whether it's micro HDMI or full-size HDMI. But that being said, I think I can personally give Nikon a pass for putting a micro HDMI in this, even though it is a little bit ridiculous in 2025 to be doing that. But I get it, because this monitor is just too damn good. There really isn't a need to be putting a 5-inch monitor on here. Because in reality, going from 4 to 5, it's not really much of a difference. And it's just so clear, crisp, and the clarity is incredible. And combined with the ability to use the rocker, which is this bit right here, you get like 5 steps of a digital zoom. I don't know what the exact magnification specs are, but it's the cleanest digital zoom I've ever seen. I don't even need focus peaking, which for some reason is not available when you're filming in 6K R3D at 24 frames per second. I'm hoping that comes with a firmware update, and I'll talk about what I expect Nikon to provide us in firmware updates to come. But that being said, I don't need focus peaking because I can just digitally zoom in to monitor and check my focus, and it has so much clarity and detail, even going into 5x with that digital zoom. So that experience alone is what sold me on this camera. And it's $2,200, which is absolutely mind-blowing. I don't like calling things a camera killer, and it's not an FX3 killer, because the FX3 has been out for so long, and that is a testament to Sony and how they've made that camera in such a way that we're using it as the standard. But I want to see a 4-inch monitor going forward in all cinema cameras. Accessibility is the biggest thing about this camera. The barrier to entry is so low for what you get in this package. This is a first for me of getting into the world of Red. Now it obviously is a collaboration with Nikon and Red because Nikon now own Red. So if we look at the back of the screen, it's not just a Nikon camera. It says Nikon Red right there. So it has some Red technology in it. And with that comes that R3D color space, which has been amazing. It's been a huge learning experience for me because it's my first time, as I mentioned, using a RAW format for filming video. And as somebody who's been really into video over the last couple of years, it's been great to kind of just push myself and experience something new. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what RAW video in general offers, it gives you so much more flexibility in post. It gives you the ability to change your ISO after the fact and your white balance and your hue. So, magenta and greens. And that in of itself has been incredible. It's been confusing, but it's been incredible. And the confusion, I think, has been across the board for people who have picked up this camera. And I want to share some clarity from my experience with talking with other people who have been using this. So some of the things I'm going to be sharing, they're not necessarily things that I've discovered. It's been from talking with other people who've owned these, Chris Brockhurst, Brandon Talbot, Cam Mackey, and a bunch of other people. It's been great to kind of learn from them. And for a couple of us, it's our first experience of using the Red format, so we've kind of been learning together. So with the ZR, if you're filming in R3D, it has two gain bases. The first base is 800 and the secondary is 6400. But the biggest thing that I've learned that's worked for me, now I do have my own LUT that I use to monitor that I've imported onto this camera, and you can just use the standard Rec 709. You can use ones that Red provides, and you can download and import them onto the camera. But as someone who's come from the Sony FX6, I only exposed by using the waveforms, and they are way different on this. When you're in R3D, they don't go to the very top of the waveforms. They kind of go to the second from the top line on that waveform graph. And I had to actually set my zebras, and I've actually been using the zebras for my exposure rather than the waveforms. I mean, I still do use the waveforms just to kind of double check things, but the zebras are where I can make sure that I'm not clipping in my highlights. And what has worked for me is pushing my exposure to that very top clipping point. I get my zebras to peak, and then I bring it down just a tiny bit. And that way I know that my highlights are protected and my shadows are exposed properly. Another thing that I learned about Red RAW is there is no internal noise reduction that that I've been used to with S-Log3. Whether it's the FX3, the ZV-1, even the FX6, there is still a little bit of noise reduction baked into the camera that you cannot turn off. So when you bring it into edit, you kind of have a somewhat cleaned up image. Now, I do noise reduction on my Sony cameras, but when you're filming in Red, that has to be something to take into consideration, that it's going to be a noisy footage right off the bat. Essentially, there's going to be some grain in there, which personally I don't mind, and I end up adding a little bit of grain anyway, something that I've been working on with my own color grade of getting a really nice kind of film-inspired grain structure. But that's something to take into consideration if you are picking up this camera and you're shooting in R3D and you bring it in and you're like, oh my goodness, this is incredibly noisy. All you need to do is add a little bit of noise reduction and it cleans up tremendously. I also want to talk about file sizes. R3D is incredibly huge. It's insanely big. From what I have understood talking to other people, the codec that they're using is somewhere in the middle of what Red offers. So it's not the most efficient in terms of memory space. And that's something that people are hoping will come with a firmware update, is to give us more options and more essentially memory efficient codecs. But it hasn't been the end of the world. In my opinion, you just get more memory cards, you get larger memory cards, you get more hard drives. And that's essentially what I've done. And speaking of memory cards, I have it somewhere over here. I can't remember the exact model of this one, but it's what they recommend. It's verified or certified, should I say, for RED cinema cameras. This is a 1.6 terabyte, so it's plenty of space. I actually have two of these, but it does fill up very quickly. As soon as I got this camera, I went down to the desert and actually had a campaign, and it was kind of risky because it was my first kind of shoot with the ZR, and I went full speed ahead for something that we couldn't essentially reshoot. But I figured that was the best way to go straight into the deep end. I was kind of learning on the fly a little bit, but yeah, the file sizes, I filmed over 1 terabyte in about 3 days of filming. So some specific numbers: a 30-second clip in R3D, 24 frames per second in 6K is about 5.7 gigabytes. So you can do the math for like a minute or 10 seconds, whatever it may be. So yeah, they're pretty heavy, pretty large files, but it's not something that can't be fixed by just getting larger memory cards and more hard drives, essentially. It looks like an FX3. It's a square body, there's no viewfinder. The grip leaves something to be desired. I do have a small rig cage coming, but I live in the US and it's not available for, I believe, another 9 days here. 20th of November, I believe they're shipping out in the US. So I'm itching to get my hands on that for many reasons, not just the grip, but the grip is the biggest thing, especially when I'm using my anamorphic lenses that are incredibly heavy. This poor excuse of a grip feels like I'm crimping something on a climbing wall, and then when that weight is pulling down, my hand fatigues pretty quickly. So for handheld filming, it does become an issue. So I'm excited for the grip, but I'm also excited for some more mounting points because this only has 1/4-20 at the bottom, unlike the FX3 that has 2 on the top and 2 on the sides, well, 1 on each side. This only has 1. So that cage is going to offer me some extra mounting points, which is crucial when I'm doing my hard mounted shots on a vehicle. At the moment, I've just been using my very large tilter Hydra setup, which is actually really good, but I've been having to mount it to the lens itself rather than on the camera body when I'm using my heavier anamorphic lenses, just to remove any extra vibrations that would come. But when I get that cage, I can add a secondary mount point to the top, and that just stops the camera from essentially having micro jitters from up and down movement. So that's probably my main recommendation in terms of an accessory, is just getting that small rig grip. They do the grip where it's just a grip and an L plate, and they have a full cage, you know, so there's some different options depending on what you like and how you like to set up your camera. Something else that stood out to me is the audio. It's 32-bit float internal recording. And also you can do a pass-through. It has an interface in the hot shoe, which is something that's a first for Nikon. And they have a microphone that is back-ordered. And I'm waiting for that to come, which is also 32-bit float that just goes directly as a pass-through. And I think if you use, I think one of the Hollyland mics, the lav mics have 32-bit float pass-through with their system, the latest one. And that's something that I also want to pick up. But in of itself, the onboard microphone is actually really good. And I'll throw up some examples right here. You can kind of listen for yourself and make your own opinion. Okay, so I'm anticipating that this may be a question, and I'm just filming on the ZR with the internal microphones. No post-production done on the audio quality. I do some post work in DaVinci on my dialogue with my lav mic, so I'm going to add that in now and then let you make a comparison between no audio modifications and then some audio modifications in DaVinci. Now, that being said, the acoustics in my office are pretty terrible. It's hardwood floors and no sound deadening panels or anything. So I don't recommend using the onboard microphone for anything like this, but for outdoor,
audio, whether it's like ambient sounds, the drive-by stuff, the internal engine sounds with my interior videos in the vehicle. It does pretty well. And for being an onboard microphone, I don't really have any complaints.
So for an onboard microphone, I think that's pretty impressive. And being 32-bit float, it's really hard to clip and you can't really clip the audio. So I'm able to just have full flexibility in post or bringing my levels up or down, depending on where they're sitting in those waveforms. Okay, I wanted to talk about some things that I really want Nikon to address for us going forward. The ZR is a fantastic camera and it's a great start for the first red Nikon cinema camera that we've seen. And at its price point at $2,200, it's not really fair to make some complaints, but they do make some bold statements in the press release of this camera stating that they didn't hold anything back. And I talked about this in my initial impressions video and I will reiterate it again, but we absolutely need anamorphic desqueeze in camera as there's no support for that at the moment whatsoever. When I'm using anamorphic lenses, it's fully squeezed and it doesn't do that 4-inch screen any justice and kind of defeats the point of having it when we're unable to desqueeze anamorphic footage. And I think it's something that should be able to come as a firmware relatively easily. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but that's something that I definitely want to see moving forward in a firmware update very soon. I would obviously love OpenGate. I'm not sure if we will get it. I don't know the exact sensor we have in the ZR, if it's the same as what is in the Lumix. I believe there are some similarities. I'm not sure if there's a confirmation if it is the same in that flagship Lumix camera that does do OpenGate. That would be insane if we got that as a firmware update, but I don't think we will, and I'm not going to hold my breath. And then a couple of other things. We need focus peaking available to every format we're filming in, because it is available in 4K 120, I believe, when you're shooting in R3D, but not 60 and not 24 in 6K resolution. So that makes no sense to me, and hopefully something that gets addressed in a future firmware update as well. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with where it sits right now. Probably going to be getting a second one and replacing my ZV one, and then just rolling with both of these because I can still use my Sony lenses with the Megadap adapter and the autofocus is incredible. It's just as if I'm using a Sony camera. And the Z mount is just so versatile for a variety of other lenses. And the experience is what has sold it for me. Being able to use that 4-inch sensor, its brightness, its clarity, the rocker switch to check my focus on manual focus lenses. And once I get a cage, then it's just, I'm gonna have zero complaints essentially, other than those things that I fully expect and hope we will get in a firmware update very soon. So if you have any questions, as I mentioned, I want to do kind of a series on the Nikon ZR. I will be doing a video at some point about photography on this camera because it's a very similar sensor to what's in the Z6 III and the ZF. I just need to get some other lenses that are kind of more tailored to photography. So aside from a photography video, let me know what you want to know about this camera in my experience of using it. And yeah, more videos will be coming on this. I will be doing a color grading breakdown on how I color grade with my LUTs for R3D. Something that's been a learning experience, but I definitely feel like I've got to a point where I'm super happy with my grading process. So stay tuned for that one as well. But yeah, once again, if there's anything specific that you want to know about this camera, then just drop a comment down below or hit me up on Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.